distinguished financial dialogue series Bridging Borders, enabling Sri Lanka's market bond issuance in Indian currency, pathways and policy preparedness. Today's event marks a proud continuation of our shared mission of foster financial collaboration, policy dialogue and innovative economic partnerships between India and Sri Lanka, two nations bound by history, culture and a shared vision for growth and
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Indo-Sri Lanka Chambers of Commerce and Industry, it is my proud privilege and an honor to invite you all to this series of discussions that we're having. We have had one session in Delhi already. This is the second session that we'll be having on the subject. Our intention was to look at bridging borders was the theme, and we were looking at how can there be issuance of Sri Lankan bonds in Indian currency towards infrastructure development of Sri Lanka.
So, Deputy High Commissioner of India and Chairman of ISCCI, it's my great pleasure joining the timely important event in a juncture where the country is trying hard to take the economic trajectory through a recovery process with the contribution of almost everyone in different capacities. And other agencies, now we came to know there are more than 5,000 odd different entities are just lying and under different ministries and departments without having any specific tasks. But they have a name tag, but in a way it has become a big burden to the general public as well. Now we are collecting information, analyzing and trying to do a structural change to do the right thing, to have an efficient, the public sector, the public service to help facilitate investors and do provide the required service for the general public as well. We are doing this thing because foreign direct investments and other investments, especially between India and Sri Lanka, I think investment does not mean only, cannot be confined to the financial values. It goes beyond that. We have lots of connection, lots of cultural connection, social connection, even politically. So I think that this investment would lay a very good foundation for us. Now we are working with India as well to bring the required expertise to establish the required digital infrastructure. That digital infrastructure, I don't say would solve all the problems, but would solve lots of problems, including the fighting against the corruption as well. So we have just taken lots of measures to ensure good governance as well. So within which new industries also will open up, I suppose, with the given resources, given the knowledge and the capacity that we have, competencies that we have gained over time. We also have our own tacit knowledge, everything. So within constrained environment, we have to prioritize. We will not be able to do everything within a short term. So that's been taking place. In the prioritized areas, we have identified energy as one important sector, focusing the renewable energy sector, and that links to the other economic areas as well. And tourism also another area we are promoting. Tourism we do not take as a sector. Its performance is measured by the number of tourist arrivals. So I think that's a wrong indicator. So it really depends. Now the tourism is expanding as an experience. How best we could create opportunities and engagement and facilitate them to explore these things in a sustainable manner.
Honorable Minister of Labor and Deputy Minister of Finance and National Planning, Dr. Anil Jayantha Fernando, Honorable Member of Parliament, Dr. Rauf Hakim, former Minister of Finance, Honorable Eran Vikram Ratne, Chairman of India Sri Lanka Chamber of Commerce and Industry, General Rakesh Lumba, Dr. Sarata Bisekra and Mr. Uday Seneviratne, Vice Chairman, Dr. Naresh Bana and Dr. B.N. Bankapur, distinguished panelists of the day, ladies, gentlemen, Vanakkam, Ayubovan, Namaskar. At the outset, I must wish this gathering the best of luck for having invited me. And for this, I must congratulate ISCCI for choosing Colombo to have this conversation in some time. I am very pleased to participate in this distinguished gathering today, although at your own risk. The highly technical nature of conversation chosen today perplexed me. However, I slept well last night, simply because I was sure I have hardly anything to offer. The uplifting part, despite my challenging position today, is the topic of conversation, which is aptly titled, For the Times We Live In, Bridging Borders, Enabling Sri Lanka's Bond Market in INR. And the reason I qualify it as apt phrase is because we are living in times of narrow, nationalist, and arguably short-sighted geo-economic world. The geo-economic future seems accelerating towards a receding multilateralism, deglobalization, and withering of international trading principles and laws. With the failure of multilateral dispute redressal mechanism, countries having tendency to having bilateralist or regionalist approach to mitigate trade and investment challenges will be preferred. These challenges will significantly impact the countries of the global south. We shouldn't be surprised to see countries resorting to more and more self-interest and parochial approach to global trade and sustainable financing models for the needs of the global south. We are also seeing that the trade and economic principles of fair and equitable arrangements are facing severe onslaught. The fundamentals of economics and trading frameworks are being weaponized with political interests. We must prepare and expect that existing trading arrangements, settlement mechanisms, currency stability will continue to face headwinds and uncertain times. Perhaps it is high time that like-minded countries, in this case, India and Sri Lanka, must re-strategize and reshape our approach to the bilateral and regional trading, trade settlement mechanisms, and mobilizing innovative financing models. The conversation today on leveraging the bond market in our countries is therefore a right step in this direction. We ourselves have made modest but significant efforts to advance trading arrangements and financing framework in Indian rupee. The Reserve Bank of India issued guidelines for trade settlement in INR between India and Sri Lanka in 2023. This was a landmark step to advance bilateral and regional trade while securing it from the vagaries of politicized geo-economic environment. We went a step ahead with the introduction of Unified Payment Interface, UPI-based settlement for Indian tourists visiting Sri Lanka. These two steps would need to be looked at in the context of another recent landmark RBI permission for financial institutions and banks to issue INR-denominated loans in Sri Lanka. I've outlined some of these initiatives which may not be directly connected to the rupee bond market, but could have an immense and integral correlation to the bond market. To detail myself further, in the last decade, the INR bond market has expanded and deepened transformatively. By any account, the INR bond market is close to USD 4 to 5 billion. Of course, the current guidelines permit the benefits of INR bond market only for financing projects in India. However, may I posit, in addition to Sri Lanka issuing Indian bonds to the investors, the INR bond market could be also used for financing projects in India. This would require the distinguished panel today, as well as the policy makers and regulators back in India, to explore the feasibility and reforming facilitatory guidelines for the use of Indian rupee bonds and investments to extend INR loans to friendly countries. I'm aware of the steep regulatory challenges at our end and the risks associated to some extent in the form of vulnerability of Indian rupee volatility, lack of capital accounts INR convertibility, and the related guidelines on external commercial borrowings. However, these challenges must not desist us from academically revisiting policy reformation to expand the utility of INR bonds, even as our efforts to diversify and upscale offshore rupee-denominated bonds continue assiduously. I'm also tempted to refer here Sri Lanka's own effort to issue Sri Lankan-denominated bonds known as Serendip bonds. I leave it to the distinguished experts today to evaluate critically the success or otherwise of the bond markets in development and commercial financing. But what is heartening for me is that the offshore INR bond market has seen enthusiastic support of intent and action with Asian Development Bank and the BRICS New Development Bank floating INR-denominated bonds. Sri Lanka's own economy is steadily progressing towards stability. The launch of governance-linked bonds last year and the successful debt restructuring, in particular, with private bondholders is testimony to that. The satisfying macroeconomic picture with robust growth in tourism, one could be hopeful that the worst is over. India, as Sri Lanka's closest neighbor and steadfast partner, has stood shoulder to shoulder through this journey, from emergency assistance to the broader vision of long-term economic integration. Today, we are moving from crisis cooperation to creative collaboration. It is in this context that I invite prospective investors in Sri Lanka and India to consider investment both in Sri Lankan bond market as well as offshore INR bonds. The idea of enabling Sri Lanka's commercial entities to issue bonds in Indian rupees is not just a financial innovation. It is a long-term vision. It reflects the deepening trust between our markets and the growing strength of the Indian rupee as a regional currency. For Sri Lankan business owners and financial institutions, it offers an avenue to diversify financing sources, reduce exposure to exchange rate volatility, and attract investors familiar with Indian markets. For India, for us, it is in keeping with our neighborhood first policy. However, opportunities of this scale demand thoughtful preparation. This would require policy alignment and regulatory coordination at various levels, which is of course a technical issue and therefore best left to the professionals on either side. Indian bond markets have comparatively deep and fairly transparent structures with enough accessibility to the foreign investors. Sri Lanka, on its part, is leveraging the Gift City platform of India, calls for engaging in a deep policy conversation to leverage INR and Sri Lankan rupee bond market linkages, exploring feasibility for infrastructure finance through offshore INR bonds, not only in India, but also Sri Lanka. An integrated and collaborative approach to innovative financing mechanism coupled with settlement of trading arrangements in local currencies, as well as concluding at the earliest a more reformed and liberal bilateral free trade agreement between India and Sri Lanka in the form of ETCA will have an enduring and transformative impact on prosperity of both our countries and the region. Let us therefore, ladies and gentlemen, approach this initiative not as an isolated financial experiment, but as part of a shared aspiration to make South Asia a zone of stability, innovation, and confidence. Together, we can transform the Indian Ocean from a route of commerce into a network of financial trust. I look forward to expert conversations today to clarify some of the issues referred to in my remarks. I'm extremely grateful to Honorable Minister for his presence, and I congratulate the organizing committee of ISCCI and the chairman for having come to Colombo and organizing this event. I wish your conversations all the best. Thank you.
You can see countries' foreign currency issuance in Asia is primarily dominated in non-Asian currencies. So if you take Sri Lanka, non-Asian currencies percentage is 92%, right? So the domestic is just 5 to 8. So now this shows the potential and the opportunity for other currencies, right? If your currency is attractive, so that will work here. So in Asia, that is the nation, not only Sri Lanka, many other countries. So you can see, and you can go to the report and see more details about it. So then, as you suggested, so why international markets matter? Due to many reasons. One is depth and liquidity. So strong price discovery will be there in the market, and competitive pricing. So that is again benefited for us because our borrowing cost will be low, and risk diversification. So that is another angle rather than just stick to one, and due to the competition and all. So global best practices, and so when you do that, automatically governance mechanisms will be here with us. So what are the benefits for us when doing so? So we can have increased access to capital, so which is the requirement at the moment as a country. Then greater market liquidity, that is one of the big issues we faced earlier in Sri Lanka. Now in the capital market at the moment, we have managed to a certain level, but it is not enough. And enhanced information disclosure, so we must, as Minister also pointed out, this is very much essential. So we must be transparent, and every bit of behavior of the government and the investors, business must be, make available full information instantaneously and unbiasedly. Then improved visibility and the right market, right timing. So I think right market and the right timing. So this is the best time to invest in Sri Lanka. So if you look at SCCI, most of the corners I have seen, and most of the time they address me as the regulator. Actually, I don't like it, because we are not just only the regulator. We have a greater job to perform. So we have to create, we have to maintain, and to regulate the market. So regulation you can do once you have a market. So my job is, I think, mainly to create a market. Further and further, market development is essential. But that is why I say regulator must be flexible now. Regulator must be able to understand what the pulse of the nation and what the pulse of the requirement in the business. So that is very much essential, because now we know country needs capital. Country needs capital. And I know there are some corporates here who are struggling with business matters. So SEC came out, and even very recently we helped one of the organizations, and we said we are flexible, we are willing to help you and come up with a proper plan. So likewise, we are flexible, because in Sri Lanka, I think we just try to regulate, but we don't understand the business. So regulator must understand the business first. Otherwise, we can't regulate the market, because for you to regulate, there must be market. So that market must be created further and further. Now in our market, we have traditionally bonds and equity. So we need to have new products, and we have to go beyond that. Now in Sri Lanka, just a little while ago, former parliamentarian and the minister mentioned about the derivatives in Sri Lanka, commodities exchange. So those are the requirements. Those are the requirements. So we have to go for multi-asset commodities exchange or derivative exchange in Sri Lanka, and we are in the process of having it. So if you look at this one, I just want to tell you that we have a very good plan, and we have got a lot of comments after launching 1 month before. So I think we can work together. So we are ready to offer you enough flexibility and come into the market. So let's test the importance of Sri Lankan capital market. So you can come and, you know, if you earn, as an investor, if you earn millions, try to earn billions. And if your listed entity is looking at only billions, must be trillions. So we can facilitate. We have the courage and we have the hope that we can develop this market further and further. And I am urging and asking the government authorities also, please use the Sri Lankan capital market for capital formation. So whatever the projects, government projects, come through the Sri Lankan capital market, then that will be easiest, and that will be very flexible, and that will be the sustainable way. For example, I have no any political agenda here. I am very independent, even though I have been appointed this time by this government. But I must say, now if you take Lotus Tower, take an example, still it is not operating at the full strength, right? The investment is 103 million US, right? So if that came through the Sri Lankan capital market, no installments to be paid. The same model like JKH did. We could do that. But if that is not viable, no one will contribute, buy shares or invest. So then that tower will not be there. It's okay if it is not relevant. If it is relevant, that can be there like Cinnamon Life. So today they are completing their first year after operations, Cinnamon Life. So if you look at the regulatory vision of us, so we are encouraging transparent rules, efficient settlement infrastructure, robust risk management, and regulatory cooperation, as I mentioned. So specifically, this is our vision and key initiatives. So these are some of the openings for you to consider in the Sri Lankan market. One main thing is multi-currency board for foreign currency listing, such as in Indian rupees. So it is open. So we are ready. All the required infrastructure and whatever the regulatory requirements we have done, right? Second thing is facilitate listing of foreign currency denominated debt securities at Colombo Stock Exchange in the foreign currencies specified by CBSL as designated foreign currency. If your currency, as far as I know, it is Indian rupees accepted. So you can do that. So if there is any such initiative, just to get the clearance from the central bank, so we are ready to facilitate it. Third one has enabled infrastructure bonds to facilitate fundraising for key infrastructure project for the CSC at SCC level. So I think it is also a good news. So Indian corporates, even Indian government can consider this aspect. So in your invitation, I have seen pathways, policies, and preparedness to be investigated. So I would like to add few things. So if you take the pathways, so sovereign issuance can be done because I think you all know, we very recently at Colombo Stock Exchange we launched our CCP. That's the long-awaited clearing system. Now it's fully functional. Though stage 2 of CCP is so thank you very much.
Good afternoon to all of you. I think so far it has been excellent proceedings, and I'm really happy to see that good delegates and honorable guests, dignitaries here. And certainly I am sure all of you are eagerly waiting for this all-important panel discussions, which is on the theme of the event today. I have the pleasure of introducing the illustrious panel today, and I, on behalf of the chamber, welcome all of you onto the stage. I request all of them to come on that. It is Nishant Honorable Nisanta Vijay Ratne, then Mr. Prince Pereira. May please come on the stage. Mr. Dr. Bana, can you escort them to the stage? Mr. Sachit Pereira, Honorable Iran Vikram Ratne, and Dr. Bana. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. My thanks to ISCCI for having me here and for the support by the Indian High Commission. So, actually, the topic here, enabling Sri Lanka's market bond issuance in the Indian currencies, is a very pivotal one, especially at the time Sri Lanka is in, not just in terms of the financial side, but also many other aspects as well. So, with that, not only this, but even at another phase, as Sri Lanka is going through a crisis and slowly coming out, there is a lot of potential, especially on the side of greater integration with India. So this side is definitely one, but the other areas we need to work on would be trade, other areas. So for example, we need, so there is huge potential, I mean, with India growing at such a large scale. But what people don't realize is that not just India, but one state in India, Tamil Nadu, that is expected to be a $1 trillion economy by 2034. So I wrote in the paper that if Tamil Nadu itself can sustain that growth, by the mid-2040s, the state of Tamil Nadu will have a larger economy than Russia. So that's what we are looking at just in the north of us. So we definitely, this is a big opportunity, and we will have to maximize the benefit. I'll first go to Honorable Mr. Iran Vikramaratne. You know, you've been a former finance minister and with your corporate background. So right now, the first thing is we see that the BRICS bank, the NDB bank, is planning to issue bonds in the Indian currency next year. So as you know, the Indian currency is very well placed to become a reserve currency. So do you think that in future that you know, ISPs of Sri Lanka too could be issued in the Indian currency, the benefits, your thoughts?
Thank you. Yeah, I think the reality has been talked about, and it's the reality of the shift in geopolitics, the shift in the global economies, and the rise of Asia, India and China. And then small countries like us, and our future is basically in integration and incorporation, and also joining all the value chains that are there, if I say it in short. And that's a way to basically move forward. But as we all know, life is not only about economics. Life is more than economics. It's about people's cultures, their languages, their distinctiveness, and so forth and so on. So one of the issues that smaller countries in the region will face is, when you're dealing particularly with a larger country, right, that you have certain reservations and fears. And this is not often spoken about. In fact, I was in Delhi speaking to ministers in December last year, and we were talking about, particularly on energy, how do we actually cooperate? And India has bilateral relationships with Bhutan, with Nepal, about 3 countries. And then I said, why not have a multilateral arrangement? He looked at me and he smiled, and then he said, why did you say that? I said, there's a good reason I said it, because you are big and I'm small, right? And he smiled and he laughed and he said, I fully hear you. I fully understand what you are saying. He said to me, and I said, Mr. Minister, it's nothing new, because I said 2,000 years ago, you say, your king sat there and my prince sat in my chair, and they had the same conversation, that the reality, and the realities don't change, the realities are the same. It's a question of how do you actually deal with realities. So when you get into smaller countries and small economies, we naturally have concerns of how do we actually guard against basically protecting, if you want, our identity. Economic cooperation is a given, absolute given. You just mentioned it. particularly about Tamil Nadu and the growth of the Indian economy. This is the bus Sri Lanka cannot afford to miss. And we certainly, basically, should get on this bus, and we certainly should integrate. So with India's internationalization of the Indian rupee, you see, which is also a change that's happening, we certainly become a part of that. And I think that there are ways in which it can be done, particularly, we are talking here about debt and talking about bonds, but I would take one step back and say particularly about direct foreign investment, right, and the environment, and some of the subjects were touched upon because of the lack of time. I won't get into that. Sri Lanka still needs to do some major reforms. The IMF program has only helped us to come so far. It has helped us to come from chaos to stability. But to move from stability to growth, it's another huge step. And that's not going to come through an IMF program. It's going to come by internal reforms the country needs to actually do and the present government needs to actually do. Now, if we move there, and then, of course, debt becomes a part in any business because you have to leverage capital and you have to go debt. And I think the issuing of bonds denominated in Indian currency is a welcome thing. And also, as many people already referred to, there are many different ways of doing it, and there are also ways of how we can get it listed, in different ways, so that we could actually increase the number of people who could actually participate in the process. I won't say more than that because I know you're fighting for time.
Thank you, Mr. Vikramant. So my next question is to Mr. Prince Pereira. In your view, how do you think the private banks can help the government in this sort of an endeavor? I mean, especially that you all are planning to put place masala bonds in GIFT City.
Growth is very high, so the domestic savings and the domestic expansion is so, there is a deficit about 4-5%, I recently read article. So there is enough potential for Sri Lanka also whenever possible to participate in those potential and benefit from this thing, because last 2 years we didn't have that much of a credit demand in Sri Lanka. There was an accumulation of dollar reserves in banking system, so that is why we started lending. Collectively, all banks would have lent, in my estimates, about a 1 billion, close to slightly less than $1 billion in Indian markets. How do we do it in India? So India, there is a scheme called the ECB, External Commercial Borrowing. So we have lent to most microfinance companies in India, non-bank financial institutions in India, manufacturing institutions in India, and also Sri Lankan companies doing business in India. About a month back, I was in Pune and Mysore. We have one customer of Sri Lankan origin is doing a project in India, 80 million project. So we are partly financing that along with the Indian bank. So we are happy to experience that this development together with especially with the Indian bank. So we are partly financing those things with our confidence and our support. India is also very happy to support Sri Lankan customers. So our keen objective is to support Sri Lankan businesses doing business in India. They need substantial support. Currently, we are supporting in terms of dollar, but once the Indian currency is a tradable currency, we can lend them in INR also, because most companies doing business in India, when their revenue is in Indian rupee, they prefer to borrow in INR. So we need to find solutions to lend them in INR. So that is why now that DFCC has recently listed our bonds in Luxembourg and also listed in India, GIFT City also. GIFT City supported us a lot, and we are very thankful for GIFT City to take in the initiative to help us to list that one. So our next plan is next about 2 weeks time, we'll be issuing the first blue bond in Sri Lanka. And we have planned to raise funds in India by issuing a corporate bond in the GIFT City in, we call this masala bond. Masala bond is a dollar denominated for the investor, but the investee, it is in INR. So if the investor is taking the exchange rate risk of the INR dollar, and the investee is basically taking the advantage of INR. So if we can raise those INR, then we can support businesses in India, not only Sri Lankan businesses, but Indian companies also who wants to borrow in INR. So that's our plan. In Sri Lankan context, we have opened INR accounts for investors. There are some tourism-related businesses where they like to receive in INR and maintain INR in their deposits. So all banks are capable of maintaining that. But the current challenge is when we open INR accounts for those receivables, especially tourism-related receivables, we can't pay interest for the deposit because RBI doesn't support that yet. But I hear that by last October, 10th October, they have facilitated investment into INR government securities. With that, we will be able to invest in INR securities. With that, we will be able to support all these investors who want to have a portfolio of assets in INR. These are the development that we have gone ahead, and we have a couple of challenges. We are happy to have a detailed discussion at a different place.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll move to Mr. Sachit. Yes. So, based on your deep experience, especially on the treasury side, how can Sri Lanka develop a functioning INR yield curve, especially when it comes to corporate and governance side?
Right. So you have the INR yield curve in India, right? So in the Sri Lankan context, what you simply do is you add the credit margin from a country like India to Sri Lanka, funds flowing from India. So we can lead it with a government issuance, so that same difference should reflect in the pricing. Otherwise, it creates an arbitrage. Say, for instance, India is a BBB rated country. I think the price for them would be US Treasuries plus 100 basis points. I'm not sure about the exact pricing. And Sri Lanka with, let's say we get upgrade, and we get, I think we should get about 350, 400 prints, do you think? Yeah. I'm not so familiar with the exact rate, but that sets a sort of a margin between India and Sri Lanka, for instance. So that 350, so 250 then. Sri Lanka is 350 for USD, India is 100 for USD, then between the two currencies it should be 250 for an Indian investor to invest in Sri Lankan sovereign bonds in IRA. So you can use that proxy. Now the problem is that India doesn't issue USD bonds, right? So they have never done that. So then you have to use a proxy for the proxy again. You can use the Indonesia bond, which is trading around 75 basis points, I think. Exim Bank of India has gone to the bond market and issued around 100 basis points. I think it's 100 basis points. So you can use those as proxies to set the yield curve to be used for the Sri Lankan corporates to go raise funding in India. Anything north or south of that theoretical rate creates an arbitrage. So that's how you can work around government going and setting up a, it's not easy to set up a full benchmark, right? Because you have to issue various maturities. So it's better to establish one benchmark, say the 5-year bond, and then use that as a proxy across the curve. That's how you can do that.
Thank you. Then I'll go to Mr. Nishant. Coming from the construction sector, what are the development requirements and investments needed as a general?
During the period 2020 to 2023, during that 4 years, we had a severe economic crisis, during which period there was high inflation, then material imports were restricted, and the negative GDP growth, and as well as construction industry was having a negative growth. Now, as a result, with IMF intervention, since we could not honor the debt payments, there was restructuring of debts, and we have got a respite till 2028 to start paying the international debt. Another aspect that we are looking to is that due to this economic crisis, the poverty level increased in Sri Lanka. At the moment, the poverty level is about 25% of the population, and another about 10% is on the borderline. So now to face this twin challenge, that is to raise our external income to meet the debt payments, and also have economic growth to alleviate the poverty, we have to have high growth. Now, as per the IMF, we need to achieve a minimum GDP growth of 5%. But the prediction for 2025 is 3.1%. So we are way below the required 5%. Now, as the government is not having much financial space to invest on capital developments due to budgetary restrictions, the only way would be to attract more and more direct investments and FDIs to meet the development needs. IMF has highlighted that our level of FDI inflows had been around 0.5% of the GDP, that we should achieve minimum 1.5% of the GDP. It's a positive development that during the first 6 months of this year, based on the FDIs totaling 507 million USD, we may touch about 1%, barely touch about 1% of the GDP this year. Now, Honorable Minister mentioned certain trust areas for the economic development. I will take few examples about the financial investment needed in those areas. For example, if we take Katunak Airport, which is the main international gateway in Sri Lanka.
Stock markets are doing very well. And here, as a project person, I have been studying for a couple of years that we have dearth of capital to develop the projects to be bid out, because while IMF and ADB has been able to sustain and control or maintain the economy, the actual multiplier effect, as my colleague has earlier, Professor Iran had mentioned, that you have to have that impact in the economy, the multiplier effect where the job creation happens, where the capital formation happens, and then only the economic growth can be realized. So, and poverty can be alleviated. So, for that, you need to have projects ready to be bid out in a transparent, well-governed fashion to ensure that the projects are ready. We came across that yes, regional economies can play a part, and Indian economic growth can be also tapped for that. So while you mentioned that Indian economy, the bond market is doing well, so what is needed is the fiscal prudence and governance structure, and as everybody has debated, it's possible to raise funds. The requirement would be to utilize those funds either purely as Indian origin funds or blend it with other multilateral financial institutions and give an entire support to a particular project, whether in the initial phase or as a viability gap funding, basically to ensure that yes, the project selected is a viable project, not as it was mentioned earlier, I think by the keynote speaker, that unviable projects also have been taken up in the past. And so it has to be a very transparent, well identified, remunerative and bankable projects which should be taken up, which further have multiplier effect and the economy gets a boost. So the bond markets of India, which are day in and day out developing with the new products last year, I mean for last few years, which is infrastructure investment trusts, which have been launched and they have been very well received in India. They are doing very well and they are further moving towards tokenization. And all that is going to lead to more availability of funds for development of infrastructure in a more transparent and governable fashion.
Thank you, Dr. Bana.
Good afternoon, good evening, almost, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Naresh Bana and the team has worked very hard, and I would not mention names of other gentlemen and ladies, especially Deepika, who has taken the lead. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us this afternoon. For diligent participation and pointed questions made it lively and useful. Due to the lack of time, of course, we couldn't ask many questions, but next time maybe we will. You are now cordially invited to join us for high tea and networking. And again, have a pleasant evening ahead, and maybe the bridge between India and Sri Lanka in the marine sector as well as in every area continue to shine to get brighter with every shared success. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.